positive feedback loop. Three, two, one.
Hi, welcome to Positive Feedback Loop. This is Luis.
Stephanie is here.
Hola,
And
Brian.
This is our wonderful guest, Brian,
Thank you.
here from Follow the Honey to talk a little bit about his product and tell us a little bit about bees and the wonderful world that is beekeeping and bee products. So just a recap for new listeners. This is Positive Feedback Loop. We're a show. We go into detail on topics that we find interesting and just learn a little bit about each other with each other. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. Let's begin. So Brian, tell us a little bit about your service here. Follow the Honey, correct?
Sure. Yes, Follow the Honey. But first of all, I'm thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. I have not ever been on a podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure having you.
Great, popping the bubble.
You are our second guest ever. Our first guest was on our first episode, and he was there for, I think, 10 minutes?
Yep, Nick.
Yeah, Nick Wong, exemplary.
Exemplary
Wong.
first guest.
Yes.
I've heard of that guy.
So you have to live up to his standard.
Well, I'll do my best. I mean, I did bring honey with me, so.
I think he's
Yeah.
winning
Did
already.
he do that? Yeah.
No, he
Can you
brought
smell
nothing.
it yet?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
It's
So
awesome.
anyway, Follow the Honey was founded in 2006, and actually we have a brick and mortar in Harvard Square. But the goal was, from the outset, to connect beekeepers on the margins from around the world to markets where people can pay for the honey and the beautiful honey it is.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It's gorgeous. You have an interesting array of colors. You have all the way from black honey to golden honey.
Yeah, so
and it's fantastic.
It looks like the maple syrup testers, where they go from dark to light.
Yeah, well, if you want to mix up your waffles sometime, I would say try some honey instead of.
I actually prefer honey on my pancakes to syrup.
Yeah, and we've got many varieties of honey, and so basically the variety of honey and the reason they're different colors and different flavors is that it is derived from the nectar source which the bees are foraging from, right? So you're only limited in variation by the variations of the flora in an area where bees are foraging. So yeah, it's a fascinating world. We have this light honey is a wildflower from Barre, Massachusetts.
Wow.
And our beekeeper George O'Neill has been with Follow the Honey since 2011 when we opened our shop in Harvard Square at 1132 Mass Ave. So actually, since I have the honey here, I think it would be appropriate to try some.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, and we should describe what we're seeing as we taste it. So Brian is going for this beautiful golden colored honey. It's very yellow, looks like flax colored even.
Yeah, and some might call it the sunshine.
Oh, sunshine! I like it.
I've heard it called sunshine, but this is a multifloral.
Okay.
So
what does multifloral mean?
So multifloral as opposed to monofloral. Multifloral, the bees are foraging from many different plants and flowers. Monofloral is the bees are foraging predominantly from one nectar source. So one tree or one plant and the flower of that. So yeah, go ahead and taste that.
So we're tasting this.
And it's amazing how useful bees are in general. I mean, they have been fantastically important for the development of agriculture throughout history.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
and most plants that exist because of bees pollinating them. Otherwise, we'd have much less variety of food.
Yeah, and so for listeners who can't possibly experience this right now, and I apologize since this is a very you're only listening to
like
eating.
This is like a curse,
This is delicious.
That's just the first one, guys.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna describe this one. I would say it's very aromatic. It smells almost like perfume a little bit. And it's a little bit more cloudy, but it's got personality, I would say.
And
that's good. It's different from what I'm used to.
It's got a good substantial
Yeah.
feel. So who pasteurizes honey? Is this typical honey in the grocery store is pasteurized?
You can look at the label. It's been common in throughout the history of sort of industrialization of honey. It kills the microbes, which is not really necessary because honey is antimicrobial. It's been used to treat wounds.
Fascinating.
Throughout history, actually, I've read the same. I know that, for example, for arrow wounds, one of the things that they would recommend would be a honey salve. They would use honey to patch you up.
Yeah.
As I guess just before bandages were a thing that you could actually use and were clean.
You know,
Yeah.
in one of the beautiful things about working with honey and you know, starting a company around honey is that honey doesn't expire.
Yeah.
Really?
But it
So-
does crystallize.
So if it crystallizes, what would you do to bring it back to the state you're used to?
I can put it in warm water and it will liquefy.
Yeah.
Again.
They found honey that's thousands of years old and it's still edible.
Yeah, they found it in the
Fascinating.
Egyptian tombs.
So Luis is trying the second lightest.
This is even more.
This is a red
Aromatic.
bamboo.
This looks like amber.
This is from Carlisle, Mass.
Okay.
And this is a monofloral. It's actually a Japanese knotweed, which is an invasive species from guess where? Japan.
We're currently recording this within Questrom School of Business in Boston University, and that's one of the reasons why we're so worried about spilling honey anywhere, because we're in a team room. And one of the things we noticed when we first came into this room is the fact that whoever was here before us seems to have stolen all of the chairs in the building.
There are
Because
many
they are-
chairs.
We are surrounded by mountains of chairs.
We
I don't
could-
know what is happening.
And
There was
monitors.
like 3 TVs in here. We got a whiteboard. We have everything. I'm very confused as to what happened.
Maybe they were in Mod 3 doing something. But anyway.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
that's a really wonderful, almost a lighter honey, not as sweet as the first.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's a beautiful honey.
It's
But
Japanese.
yes, well, so it's from Carlisle, but,
it's from Carlisle.
but the bees are foraging on a Japanese knotweed, which is
Okay.
invasive. And
So,
yeah.
tell me a little bit, because I'm very curious about this, and I've been meaning to ask since basically you got here. What is the state of the science and the impact of colony collapse disorder on your business?
I think it's bringing more awareness to people around honeybees, the importance of honeybees as pollinators of
Yeah.
our food, and it's, you know, people coming in, they ask about that.
So before
it's raising awareness about bees, I think, actually, which is very important.
Yeah.
As bees provide massive, you know, pollination to massive quantities of food for us. I mean, all of our flowering fruits and nuts. Well, okay, I'm from California, from the Central Valley, Davis, but 90% of the world's almond exports come from California.
That's
And
Fascinating.
that's
fascinating,
hundreds
yeah.
of billions of dollars
Yeah.
in industry. Well, what's pollinating them? So truckloads of bees are coming in and being dropped in these orchards to pollinate these almonds.
And could you
It's-
describe colony collapse disorder to our listeners who might not be aware?
Anecdotally, I can describe it because the evidence on this is thin, and a lot of that is, I mean, I have a feeling that I know what it is, and there's more longer-term studies coming out
Yeah.
to point us in directions that it's really neonicotinoids, which are used in certain pesticides as crop protectors for pests,
Yeah.
and that bees foraging in the same areas are also becoming exposed. And what a neonicotinoid does is it disrupts the nervous system of the bees, causing the eventual, confusion and eventual collapse of the colony, disappearance, and death. So the larger companies will say that it's the ones, you know, making these pesticides and putting neonicotinoids in them will often drop, well, it's the changing climate, it's
Yeah.
human impact, you go down the list of potential impacts, and you can say, well, you know what, maybe those do have an impact on it to some degree, but to what degree? You know, and so there's longer term studies that are coming out and actually now starting to point more conclusively at you know, neonicotinoids having a stronger role than some of these other factors.
So basically, you're bringing in these bees, they pollinate an area, but the problem is that they're pollinating things that have been sprayed with a chemical
Well,
that eventually
That's
kills the bee.
disrupting
Well,
them.
that's the theory, at least.
and
Right.
the larger issue
Yeah.
actually is that you're bringing these pesticides into areas where there are native bee populations, right? So when I talk about local honey, I'm talking about local to the area from which it's coming.
Right.
Whereas the pollination that's happening and this is really kind of the industrial level back to what you were asking, what am I getting in the store? Sometimes it's, you know, these trucks going around the country and collecting, you know, bees collecting and pollinating these different orchards or whatever, or other flowering fruit trees. And then all that is being mixed together.
So it's
And-
several types of honey
Yeah.
being just being gathered, mixed industrially,
Mhm.
and then just offered up as general clover honey.
Yeah, so that's where a bulk of honey comes from. In other
Okay.
senses, if it's coming from different countries, and this is really a key part of Follow the Honey, is to make sure that we are giving credit back to the countries, the regions, the villages, the beekeepers, and the florals that this honey is coming from. Whereas, and so in a lot of these developing countries, beekeepers don't have a market for their honey. So they are left open for exploitation by people coming around looking to buy up cheap honey and then send it out to other countries and then resell it, repack it, resell it. Or
resell it with
remix
as a marquee product saying, it's a high grade
water
honey.
it down or mix it with corn syrup or XYZ. So
I never knew that honey was mixed. Like the types of honey were mixed. And I'm looking online and it seems that in the finer honeys, they try to keep certain types separate. So they have, for example, the fine ones kept separate, the sourwood honeys. So sourwood honey from like a stronger sourwood bloom would be kept separate. So it's just interesting to see.
For example, this is a beautiful honey from...
So just before we go on and we taste another one of these wonderful honeys, let's bring in our other co-host, Ray Dogum, who has just arrived.
Welcome,
Hello,
Ray.
Thanks, guys.
Bienvenue.
Sorry I was a little late here, but...
You've missed a wonderful conversation about honey and just the impact of civilization on this interesting and fascinating industry.
But you didn't miss the whole thing. We're only halfway through the honeys. So you
honey is still
You have more honey to try,
The honey
Ray.
is still flowing.
And he can catch up.
So actually, what you're talking about, these unique honeys and follow the honey's role in giving credit, keeping the integrity and the narrative behind those honeys. Here's a honey from Louisiana, from one of the largest protected bayous in the U.S. This is a Tupelo honey. You may have heard like Van Morrison singing about sweet as Tupelo honey at points, but this is a reference to this
We'll
honey.
put a link on the website to the song.
This is a smooth honey. It's
And
beautiful.
I'll point out that the honey is a reddish color.
Ooh, it's very thin and it's dripping.
Yeah,
Woo!
this one drips a lot faster than the
this
other
was-
ones that we had.
Well, Tupelo crystallizes
Whoa.
much slower.
Really?
Some say it never crystallizes.
Seriously?
I have to disagree, but it
Wow,
takes
it's just
some-
like, it's smooth and buttery. It's buttery.
Buttery honey.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I
It's
definitely agree.
slippery.
This could
Yeah.
be, I like.
Wow.
It feels more processed, but it isn't. So
It doesn't feel
it's
processed.
not processed.
It's
That's
like
not the word. Yeah,
fine.
fine. That's the word.
It's
Yeah,
fine.
that's it. That's
What's
it.
it called
That's what I
now?
was looking for.
This is a Tupelo. It's Atchafalaya Tupelo from the bayous of southern.
And it's got a
Louisiana.
green hint to it.
Call it number 2.
Yes, it
It's
does.
got a vegetable hint to it,
Mhm.
which I actually kind of like.
I love it.
And this is from Avery Allen, beekeeper that we've also been working with since our early days, who came into the shop on National Honeybee Day, I think in 2011 or 2012. Was it the opening day? Anyway, I wasn't around for that, but we've carried his honey exclusively since then. Did everyone get a taste?
I believe
think?
we all got a taste.
Got that
And
one.
actually, this whole conversation about honey is very interesting, especially, and even with going into the colony collapse store and everything, there's a lot of different industries that have been disrupted by changes to the climate or changes due to pollution, etc. For example, I know that chocolate is currently going to be going through a bit of it's going to get turned upside down because the conditions for actually growing chocolate effectively is generally in a very limited zone of the planet that you can actually grow it, and that zone is shrinking due to climate change. So the prices of chocolate are actually going to be going up over the next few years, and
Certain types of chocolate? Because I know
Just
that cacao
chocolate.
beans are sourced from many different regions.
but that's what I mean. The cacao bean itself is going to becoming
no matter
more
where in
scarce.
the world it comes from.
Well, because they're grown in very limited locations. Even if it's different places in the world, it's generally the same belt of the world.
Okay.
And
Well-
similarly, honey is one such product, and I think we need to support local honey farmers and small honey farmers, so that the industry can continue going.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned cacao, because this is looking actually not just at honey, but the honeybee and the people who take care of the honeybees and those folks as a platform for providing high quality food to our planet. And what's pollinating the coffee and the cacao and the mangoes and the avocados? Well, in a lot of cases, honeybees. So bees are instrumental and vital to the ecosystems that we live in. The trees that grow and cross-pollination of trees and seed and water that allow our planet to grow. So I think honey has been it's been a wonderful world so far, and I'm excited to get deeper into it. Really, especially in cross-pollination with other sectors that are actually tied together by the honeybee. And that's what we've been working on in Tanzania, which brings us to the next honey. Tanzania asali. This is what I was spending my summer
That looks a bit more viscous there.
working to get.
A very dark honey.
Very dark, smoky, almost like molasses. You guys can describe it. I won't give you the.
We should
Yeah,
have
I'll
had the
put
pro
words-
describing it.
I won't put the words
will-
in your mouth.
I will
but-
agree. It is actually the most unusual tasting of all the honeys, I'd say. It's the one that when I think of the taste of honey, this is the one that goes the most against that. But it's
Wow.
different in a good way.
Tastes like bacon.
Yeah, a little bit. I would say so.
Bacon, maybe a little bit of maple.
Yeah, so if you don't eat bacon,
Maple syrup.
you can come have.
What
it.
if
Oh,
if
yeah.
you can't eat bacon?
I got
But this
this
is
bacon
from the Miombo blossom. So that smoke, that smoky profile is actually derived from the blossom of this flower, this Miombo blossom, which is native to Tanzania and much of Africa.
So when they use
So-
smoke to calm bees down, for example, that doesn't affect the taste of the honey.
No, not unless they're over smoking the hive regularly.
Okay.
If it's like if you put something in a smoker, then yes. But if you are smoking the bees and then you're opening up to ventilate it, which is normal practice, then no, it won't have an impact.
So I'm going to stop us here for now so we can take a small commercial break. So we're going to be right back after a word from our sponsors. And I look forward to tasting more honey in the future.
Yeah, thanks so much,
Thanks.
Brian, for coming and educating us about bees and about Follow the Honey, which is located in Cambridge. And I love passing by and seeing the products.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this wonderful podcast. I'm Brian Woerner, Chief of Operations for Follow the Honey, Inc., our Harvard human rights honey company. And I would love to welcome you to come do a full honey tasting anytime you like, 11 to 7 daily, 12 to 5 on Sundays. We have over 30 honeys there. We have honeys on tap, so you can bring your jar and come get some honey for your honey. Beeswax candles, creams, lip balms. It's a beautiful space. 1132 Mass Ave. As it gets warmer, we also have a nectar deck in back with a beehive. So it's really sort of a place to hive mind.
Welcome back to PFL Podcast after the commercial break with Brian on Follow the Honey. It's great to talk about bees and honey in general. And we actually have an insight about a new collaboration Follow the Honey is doing with BU. Luis, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so Brian told us right before he left that they are now collaborating with the Buzz Lab. So Follow the Honey and the Buzz Lab are working together, so they're going to be giving guests this honey product as thank you gifts, and they're going to be.
And
I think it's going to be good business.
I think it's a pretty cool collaboration just because of the name.
Yeah,
The Buzz Lab, you can imagine it's also called the Hive.
we have
in
a
that
lot of.
accelerator, so
yeah.
it's a really nice.
I think
collaboration
BU's
idea.
produced. I think too many bee-related companies at this point. I mean, Stephanie herself, our co-host here, has a company called Apiarity, so with a logo that is also bee-related. So there's a lot of bee stuff going on around BU.
That's
I think
true.
that might be the unofficial mascot of the Questrom School
Well,
business.
What I like about bees is the symbolism of hard work and diligence. You know, in medieval heraldry, the bee
What
was
is
a
medieval heraldry?
heraldry. That's
Yeah.
a hard word to say.
It's the
the shields that you make for your family crest.
Yeah,
Like,
Okay.
and there's very specific rules about it. Like if you have certain animals, it means these things. If you have a field versus mountain or whatever, it
Right.
means these things. And the stripes have to be going a certain way
Got
to
it.
denote another thing.
Exactly.
Right.
Or
And I
even
went-
the air, that sort of thing.
Understand.
So I attended Harvard, and every Harvard house has a shield
Right.
with symbolism on it that means certain things.
And in fact, if you get knighted, you get to choose your new crest. So I know Terry Pratchett, who I've been a long time reader of and passed away a year ago, or 2 years ago at this point. He also got to make his own crest right after being knighted for literary achievements.
Wow.
Luis, if you were knighted, what would your crest look like? What would your
It would have a jellyfish.
a jellyfish?
A jellyfish.
What would that
Jellyfish creep
represent?
me out. Oh.
Particularly the immortal jellyfish.
The immortal jellyfish.
What is that?
Something I should.
You're not familiar with it. So I don't know the new scientific name for it because they changed it, but it used to be called Turritopsis nutricula. Basically, it's a jellyfish that has the ability to, once it reaches sexual maturity, it can go back to being a polyp, which is basically like, imagine that when you get to be beyond 12 years old, you can choose to go back to being a baby, infinitely. As long as nothing kills you,
Like a cocoon.
you
just
will
chilling.
live basically forever. Yeah.
Is it really the same organism going back to that state, or
Yeah,
is it
it's the same
almost
organism.
morphing into a new being of sorts?
I think I don't know exactly. I think for a human that would be more like you're becoming a new being, mostly because if you go back to being a baby and your brain has to be rewired as a result, are you still you?
Right.
Because a baby's brain stage is very different. But for a Medusa or a jellyfish of any sort, I don't think
There's
that
a brain
we can
going
consider.
on.
Yeah, I don't think that's really much of an issue. So I think it's still the same creature, and it'll continue being that same creature unless either it runs out of food or it gets poisoned by something or it gets eaten by an animal. So it's not like they're immune, but yeah, it's one of the examples of one of the few immortal creatures out there. Also, lobsters. Lobsters can basically live almost forever. They just keep getting bigger.
Really?
Yeah.
So these animals really have like this infinite lifespan. So I'm looking at like the western honeybee. Looks like lives less than a year.
Yeah. Well, there's animals that live like a day, and
Right.
there's animals that live hundreds of years. I mean, we know turtles that live for very long time.
Right.
And obviously, there's organisms that have been around for thousands of years. There's certain trees that have been around. Like they're not just trees, but groups of trees that are all linked
It's like
together
a colony.
biologically. They're all like one massive infrastructure
Organism, right.
of an organism that has been around for thousands of years. And those are things.
Also, I find it fascinating the fungi.
Oh, they go for miles.
They can go for miles, and it's like underground, so it's very interesting to see that in
It's
the forest.
also fascinating how much these organisms take to be what they are. So I have this hydroponic arrow garden that my in-laws gave us in our house.
What
It's
do you grow?
amazing. And I grow like mint and basil and thyme.
Mint is the easiest thing to grow. It's
Right.
great.
Right.
It just doesn't fail.
But they have their roots in the water, and it's amazing to see how much water they consume.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes they beat me out for how much water they've had to drink in a day, and I'm like embarrassed for my low water consumption.
These mints are drinking more than you are.
Yeah, and they're
that's-
little, so you think they are taking more water than they usually would because they're receiving that light that.
Plus,
it's
don't
a
forget,
hydroponic
there's a
I mean,
lot of
that's-
water that gets evaporated.
Yeah,
too.
I mean that's also how they basically make food, and they use the water to basically survive in a way
Don't
that
we too?
yes, but a little differently. I think
Yeah.
that the way that they use water is a little different from human
Right.
or really animals. Although, yeah, I definitely agree that that's still insane that they consume more water than you.
I'm trying to drink more.
Yeah, but remember that a lot of the water that the humans general animals actually consume comes from food. We make water when we consume food. It's just that the amount of water we make is not really enough to satisfy the organism. So you do
Right.
actually have more water. It's just you don't see it.
We would probably consume more water if we just ate more vegetables. But as we eat more and more processed foods, those foods contain less water.
Right, most of the processed foods we eat basically are dehydrated chips and like baked goods. There's very little water. in
See,
them.
I think that
Compared to vegetables,
I think that processing food gets a bad rap. Brian earlier mentioned pasteurization as one method, and that's a method of processing a food that saves countless amounts of lives and product. So a lot of resources would be lost if we didn't pasteurize, for example, milk, which would go
Right.
back in the drop of a hat. But now, because it's pasteurized, you can keep it for
send
weeks.
it places.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
can have it be safe to drink for a long, long time.
Right, but I think milk is
But-
not overly processed. We're talking about like very processed,
Like a
frozen
cheeseburger
foods
or
that,
something?
But
yeah,
how do you define too much processing?
when you add new ingredients that preserves the chemical substrates inside the food in order for it not to break down. So when you're adding something, so when you're pasteurizing, you're not actually, you might be adding vitamin D, but the part that's pasteurizing is when you're like boiling the milk, isn't that right?
I mean, yeah, generally pasteurization is a process of heating and cooling. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the main thing. I think that there is a knee-jerk reaction that humans have, that anything that is not natural is bad. And I disagree with that.
Don't get me wrong. I eat McDonald's.
I know, but I'm saying
things
that
like
the idea that things that are not quote-unquote natural are inherently worse than their natural versions. And I disagree with that wholly. Because, for example, clothes are not natural, but they help us not die in the cold. Similarly, a constructed apartment building is not natural, but we reap great benefits from it. And I think the same stands for food. I mean, it's the whole panic around GMOs that have had no data showing any problems with them, and they help maintain the world fed far more effectively than we could have ever done 100 years ago or 200 years ago.
The stigma is this idea that it's just not natural. And I think we even had this conversation at home where we thought, are hydroponically grown plants, because it's not sunshine, it's an LED light, are they okay for you? It's your knee-jerk reaction is it okay if it's not natural? But you're right, there are a lot of things we do that are manufactured in a way. Think of the clothes we wear that have polyester blends.
Yeah.
That make it possible for us to not have to gather necessarily 100% cotton if we don't want to.
Yeah, and think about this way. The way I see our use of quote-unquote unnatural ingredients is that our evolutionary advantages as humans are a few, right? We're not the strongest. We're not the fastest. We don't have the best claws or ability or the best senses. But we do have the ability to cooperate and to pass down knowledge. And this has allowed us to take control of the natural realm and make differences to our environment to a degree that it really benefits us the most possible. Some of these changes can be very damaging to the environment and can be ultimately really bad for us, as we see with climate change. But a lot of these other things, humans are so separate from the way we used to live originally that if you were to try to go back to living that way, it would be nearly unfathomable for a person with modern education skills, etc., because it's such a completely different lifestyle. And we try to reach it in some ways or another. People try to change their diets and do these things, but these are all half measures. And
they're also based on branding, diet branding.
Yeah.
So sometimes if you want to take on a certain diet, like a meatless diet or whatever, you have to buy products
from a certain company.
Company. I mean, meatless is easy. You eat vegetables, eat beans, but there are other diets where
that's part of the problem, though, isn't it? Because ancient humans did not have access to all of these vegetables. They didn't have access to all of these things. The fact that you can say, I'm going to go back to living the way that people used to live from the beginning, it's insane. You can't. I mean, at least not with any form of comfort.
I agree. So that brings up an interesting point, and I think the question here is, so are human beings part of nature, or are they kind of separate from nature now because we're affecting nature? So in that case, all the coal that we're burning, all the unrecycled material that goes in the trash, that's just part of nature because we are a construct of nature. So in effect, that anything that we do,
everything in this world is nature.
Yeah,
that's what you're getting at.
Everything
right?
is natural.
That's what I'm saying.
So if we evolve in a certain way or use materials in a specific way, it's the same as if any animal makes. I mean, birds make nests by breaking twigs off of trees.
Are they destroying the environment by breaking these?
I mean,
twigs?
beavers make dams, and that affects their local environment. The main thing is, though, we are creatures that have used our evolutionary advantage, which, as every creature does, to change the environment around us, because that's what we can do as a species. So I think that everything that we've done is natural, because that is what we are predisposed to doing. That being said, we're also creatures that have an understanding of what impact we are having on the local environment, and it is up to us to try to mitigate those negative effects that we have.
Right, there's the cognitive, this goes back to the jellyfish, does it have a brain,
Yeah.
And the fact that we have a big enough brain that processes in a way that makes us responsible in some way, socially responsible. So not only are we evolving and adapting to our environment, we're making our houses out of the wood the same way the beavers are, but then are we putting pollutants into the atmosphere to a higher degree than we really need to? So where is the line between survival and even comfort and living in the earth the way you would like to versus when do you cross that line into destroying the environment, and when do you feel responsible for that?
And the other question is, should you feel responsible for that? Because while I feel that you should, you could make an argument that because all life on Earth is, evolved in a certain way, and all have followed a certain, whatever is biologically their imperative.
Including humans.
Yeah. Are we not just fulfilling our biological imperative by doing what's best for us as humans? And shouldn't we continue to do that? I mean, the Earth is more hardy than we give it credit for. Even if with global warming, even if things go terribly south and we destroy ourselves, it's very likely the Earth will survive, and there will be new species that come out of the hellfire. It's unlikely we're ever going to truly kill the Earth. We're more likely to kill ourselves before we kill the Earth.
At least in our
Right.
own foreseeable
Yeah,
future.
there will be life. It may not be cute life. We may not see puppies running around. We're probably going to see just a lot of bacteria if we, make the world into glass by just, nuking everything. But there will still be life for the most likely scenario.
What kind of a life are we creating, and what beauty are we creating beyond short-term survival and comfort? And when does it become a socially responsible consideration?
Yes.
And that's hard. I mean, that's really hard at even a micro level, where I have to determine, do I use this product or not? Do I support this company or not?
Yeah.
And this is a really new
Yeah.
kind of thing that we have to grapple with. It hasn't been something humans have thought about, 200-300 years ago. This was not really a conscious
I think
effort that we took upon it. This wasn't a big deal, oh, it'll be fine. All the waste, not nuclear, but probably chemical waste that we manufacture, it's just, going in the lake over here. It's not a big deal.
Right.
No, I agree. I think that even though environmental impact has affected humans since the beginning of civilization, I mean, one of the theories I've read,
right.
one of the theories I read for the disappearance of the Mayans and the Indus Valley civilization is that they affected their local environment so negatively that they could no longer exist. They basically destroyed themselves through damage to their environment.
Fascinating.
But that's just
we should
theories
be
I've
able to
read.
learn from these civilizations' mistakes, right?
Well, I mean, that's also a
Long-term
factor of
sustainability.
technology and improvements to our ability to provide for ourselves while minimizing our impact. But even these older civilizations I don't think, had much of a concept of why things were going wrong. Generally speaking, throughout history, we just thought, oh, now we have crop failures because gods.
Right. That's a good point.
It's now that we have an understanding of what's happening, we have a responsibility to try to do something about it. I feel, though, that at this point, Captain Planet should fly in and give a message to the kids, because we've been talking about environmental
Yeah.
awareness for a while.
So this has been a good way to end, thinking about bees and going into our ecosystem as a whole. Having a guest like Brian has been really interesting. We got to taste some honey today. So thanks again for listening. Visit pflpodcast.com
Right.
and definitely give us your thoughts and comments.
And one more thing I'd like to add. We talked about bees, and I want to talk to you guys about a plant, the cannabis or marijuana plant. There's an event going on February 22nd at Questrom School of Business in the auditorium at 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. We have leaders from the cannabis industry coming in to talk about what are some entrepreneurial efforts that are going on, what are some struggles, some challenges in the industry, and how you can learn more about the marijuana industry overall.
So if any of our listeners are in the Boston area and would like to learn a little bit more about the growing cannabis industry, which is likely to be very impactful in the near future, please come down to Boston University Questrom School of Business and listen to this wonderful talk.
Right, and the Eventbrite link is cannabispanel.eventbrite.com.
We'll put it on the website.
And listen to our drugs and violence episode if you want to have some background for some of this information. So
It's
thank you
episode
very
4, right?
much. Yeah, episode 4.
Yeah.
All right,
So
thank
you very much for listening. This has been Positive Feedback Loop. Stay crazy.
Stay crazy, guys.